Craig Conover has gained a new perspective following his split from Paige DeSorbo. The Southern Charm cast member shared new details about his November breakup from the summer housemate during a recent appearance on the Tamron Hall show. For starters, Craig said that while he initially felt surprised and disappointed by the split, he's now looking at the bigger picture. "I would have ended up losing myself in that relationship, because I would have given up everything to stay with her," he explained on the February 17 episode of the daytime talk series. "So the blessing is, as we're a couple months out, I see that now. That's why your mood changes throughout a breakup. You have to go through those grieving processes. It's perspective." Craig Conover clarifies his and Paige's breakup timeline. As Craig previously explained on the February 6 episode of Watch What Happens Live with Andy Cohen, he had been planning to move to New York City to live with Paige. The two had been long distance for the entirety of their 3-year romance. He also said that the pair had been discussing taking a New Year's trip together and getting married just days before they broke up. And though rumors about the cause of the split have been circulating online, Craig reiterated that there was no major event that led them to break up. Did Paige or Craig cheat during their relationship? Like Paige has recently done, Craig denied that cheating played a role in their split. "It really wasn't ugly or bad, and there wasn't infidelity," he said on the Tamron Hall show. "At the end of the day, we accomplished so much in 3 years." Paige made a similar clarification on the February 3 episode of her podcast, Giggly Squad. "I'm saying this here and now, and then I'm never saying it again. I never in the 3 years that I dated my ex-boyfriend ever physically cheated on him, emotionally cheated on him. Can you mentally cheat on him? I don't know, but I didn't." Why did Paige DeSorbo and Craig Conover break up? Paige was the one who announced the breakup back in December 2024, which was about a month after they actually split. She said that the very sad split was the right decision for both of them, moving forward in their lives. When you're in a relationship, things happen in your relationship. You take inventory of them, you evaluate, and then you decide to go forth with that relationship. And that's what I did. I decided that I didn't want to go forth with that relationship, Paige continued. No one was blindsided, no one was cheated on. The long road ahead. Craig Conover sat on the edge of the couch, a tired but thoughtful expression on his face as he watched the sunlight spill into his living room. It had been a couple of months since he and Paige DeSorbo had parted ways, and the soft murmur of the city outside his window was almost a metaphor for the quiet space he was learning to occupy within himself. The breakup had caught him by surprise at first, like a thunderstorm on a bright, cloudless day. But now, as the days had worn on, a strange clarity was starting to settle in. It wasn't the kind of clarity that came with a sense of victory or relief, but the kind that crept in slowly, almost like the realization that the future was still waiting to unfold. He exhaled deeply, leaning back against the couch as he replayed the last few months in his mind. The split had been mutual, or so he thought at the time. They hadn't fought. There had been no shouting matches, no betrayal. Just a quiet unraveling, a creeping sense that something wasn't right, despite their best efforts to make it work. They had been planning for the future. The thought of moving to New York City, living together, maybe even getting married, it had all seemed so close, so certain, but in the end, life had other plans. The Southern Charm star had spent the last few years living life on his terms, building a career, and navigating the ups and downs of being in a relationship with Paige. The long-distance nature of their romance had always been a challenge, but they had made it work, or at least he had convinced himself they were making it work. He had convinced himself that they were on the path to something bigger. They were a power couple in the making, two ambitious people with an undeniable chemistry. What could go wrong? He'd been blindsided at first, yes, but the more time passed, the more he began to see things from a different perspective. He had started to look at the bigger picture. The breakup wasn't the end of the world, he realized. It wasn't even the end of his world. It was just a new chapter, and with that came the opportunity for growth. I would have ended up losing myself if I had stayed, Craig had said during his appearance on the Tamron Hall show, the words ringing in his ears as he relived the interview. I would have given up everything to stay with her, and I see that now. He had learned a lot since that conversation, a lot about love, relationships, and about himself. The early days of their relationship had been a whirlwind. They had met on the set of Summer House, their connection instant and undeniable. Paige had been a breath of fresh air in his life, smart, funny, and effortlessly charming. But from the start, there had been an undercurrent of doubt. Craig was a man who had spent most of his life searching for something meaningful, but had never quite found it in the way he had hoped. Paige had felt like the answer, but answers in life often come with their own set of complications. The long-distance dynamic had been one of the first real hurdles. He had been living in Charleston and Paige in New York City. Their worlds were so different, and yet they had tried to blend them together, forging a bond that was more a testament to their commitment than to any actual understanding of how to make the logistics work. They had visited each other on weekends, spent hours on the phone, texted at all hours. But at the end of the day, the distance always loomed between them. That was before they had made the decision to move in together, before the dream of a future had started to take shape. But somewhere along the way, that dream had started to fray at the edges. Craig hadn't noticed it at first. How could he? He was too busy building his career, managing the pressures of being in the public eye, and trying to meet the expectations that came with being in a relationship with someone like Paige. She had her own dreams too, her own ambitions, and in many ways, they had supported each other. But in other ways, it became clear that they were growing apart. The dynamic between them had shifted, and Craig had found himself questioning whether it was enough to simply be in love. One of the most painful realizations came when they had been discussing their future. They had been on the verge of making big decisions, moving in together, starting a life in New York City, even discussing marriage. The conversations had been full of hope, excitement, and plans for the future. But just days later, Paige had ended things. Craig had been blindsided. In the aftermath, rumors had begun to swirl. People speculated about the cause of the breakup. Was there infidelity? Had they grown tired of each other? Had the pressure of their public personas been too much to bear? Craig had denied the rumors, and so had Paige. There was no betrayal, no major event that led to their breakup, just a quiet realization that, perhaps, they had outgrown each other. No one was blindsided, Paige had said when she announced their breakup to the world. No one was cheated on. It had been a mutual decision, one that was hard but necessary. And despite the sadness, it had been the right choice for both of them. As Craig navigated life after the breakup, he began to reflect on what went wrong. He found himself returning to the idea of perspective. The early days had been filled with excitement and possibility, but as time went on, he realized that he had been holding onto the relationship out of fear of letting go of something that had felt right for so long. Fear of losing someone who had become such a significant part of his life. But that fear had almost cost him himself. He had been so wrapped up in trying to make it work, in trying to keep the dream alive, that he hadn't taken the time to assess whether the dream was still worth chasing. I had to go through the grieving process, Craig had admitted. It's all about perspective. Once I started seeing the bigger picture, it all started to make sense. The grief was still there, of course. He missed Paige, their late-night talks, their shared memories, the way she made him laugh. But in the quiet moments, Craig realized that he was finally starting to see himself more clearly. He was starting to rediscover his passions, his career, and the things that had made him who he was before the relationship. In the months following the breakup, Craig threw himself into his work. He'd always had a passion for woodworking, but in the past, it had taken a backseat to everything else. Now, he found himself in the shop more often, his hands covered in sawdust, his mind focused on creating something with purpose. It was a therapeutic escape, a way for him to reconnect with the parts of himself that had been put on hold.